I felt like I was completely in prison, but it was my own, I was holding the key.
She had to break free to come back to herself.
I had to completely own my entire life, and it was me. You know, at that moment, I was the problem.
Now author and life coach Lori McAfee is sharing her walk with God.
Because of all the stories and lies that I had told myself, I had kept everyone out from loving me, including God. And that's what it comes down to, and love is the secret to life.
And her courage to embrace her calling.
I was safe where I was. I was in a safe place. But we're not always called to be safe if we're going to do things for a purpose.
On an all-new Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers. Welcome to Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers, a podcast dedicated to those seeking a more fulfilled and purposeful life through thought-provoking conversation, spiritual exploration, and authentic connections. The intentional movement has begun, and if you found yourself here, you are a part of it. Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers starts now. Hi, Lori. Welcome to Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers. I'm honored to have you here today and to talk about a really important and big topic, I think. Of course, we're going to talk about your book. You're an author, a first-time author. Your debut novel's coming out, and I'm excited to hear all about that.
Yeah.
But I know there's something really big that I think, can really dive into and have a really good chat about, faith and finding our purpose and the self-love and compassion and everything that we as women seem to be missing a little bit of, it seems, as a whole, right. But not even as women, but as society. So welcome. Exactly. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Well, let's jump in, because we were talking right before we pushed record about how faith has played such a big role in your life and why you are here today. And I've talked about this on the show quite a bit, how I feel like it is a missing link in what we are experiencing in our lives today in Western culture. It doesn't have to be Jesus. It doesn't have to be God. It could be universe. It could be whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. But this idea that there's something bigger out there guiding us and giving us purpose and giving us more of a sense of meaning. And I think this is the cause of a lot of the things that we deal with, is like feeling lost, disconnected, some mental health issues, things like that. So I would love to dive into how you found faith and what it has done for you in your life.
So I grew up in a very faith-based home. Not that my parents were overly religious or anything like that, but we went to church, and I always went to Sunday school. And so that played a huge role in my life. And then when my husband and I got married, we continued that. We can both continue to practice that because he grew up the same way.
Yeah.
And it's just grown over our life. I will tell you that my journey has not always been so faith-based. Because there was a time in my life that I walked away, not from believing in God and Jesus, but from practicing it so wholeheartedly and deeply like I do now. Mm-hmm. Just wasn't, it wasn't a priority in my life at the time, but now it's an intentional priority.
Well, what do you gain from it? Because I think what you said right there was really important, is that you grew up doing it. And it was kind of like, I think this is that's almost like what we do in life in general. We do what we're supposed to do. We do what we should do. And that's what creates the facade and the masks and doesn't allow us to show up as who we really are. So it's like, I think church is one of the biggest things that people do as a facade. You go to church, you do what you do. You don't really take what that is. And that's why I always say, you don't have to go to church to have a big belief. You don't have to, practice a quote unquote religion to be spiritual. There's so much more to it, is how you show up in your life and how you incorporate it intentionally into who you are. I think says way more about you than the action of going. One of my favorite things is when I was telling you, I moved from Southern California to Tennessee, and everyone here is way more church-based. They go to church every Sunday. It's like my husband and I laugh because we don't go to church. And so we're like, okay, where do we want to go that gets really crowded? Let's go during church hours on Sunday, because we know we can go to that restaurant. We know we can go to Costco. We can go where we need to go without the crowds because everyone goes here. But I don't believe that everyone shows up as that person that they show up in church to be. And that's where the facade really starts. Because one of my friends here says, I was talking to her about church, the church where my daughter goes to school. And I said, do you guys go there? Because we were talking about maybe joining for the community aspect. And
Right.
she goes, yeah, we're CEOs. We go on Christmas and Easter only. And I laughed because that's so true. It's part of that mask. You do what you're supposed to do. So how do we lean into it and really make it a part of our lives?
Oh, I can't imagine doing it any other way because it's such a fulfillment in seeing what Jesus does and seeing the power that he has in our life, and it's amazing to me. And so when I told you that I walked away, it was
Mm-hmm.
just we just didn't, like I said, find it a priority in my life. And now that for probably the past 20 years, we've been very faithful in church, very faithful in
Mm-hmm.
church. And we're very busy in church, but I love it. But for a long time, yes, I was going with a mask on.
Mm-hmm.
And I was one of those people that was sitting in the pew every Sunday, but I was miserable because I wasn't fully understanding. Even though I knew I had been saved, I knew all the things, I still wasn't fully grasping who he is. And the part of me that was missing was that relationship. So now it's more of a friendship. He and I have
Mm-hmm.
a friendship together. We communicate. I listen to what he says. He listens to what I say. So it's even though he's physically not here with me and I can't see him, I know he's here. And so I never doubt that in any single thing that I do.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, I was one of those with that mask on. And I can
Mm-hmm.
talk to people now. And that's one of the things that I so want, Courtney, is for people to understand church is important because we are called to go to a community of believers and to
Mm-hmm.
be in a community of faith based believers. But to go for the real reason, to go as who you truly are, to not go to be something that's just seen, but to go with a genuine heart of wanting to know more about him and the people and the congregation and everything that makes him who he is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I love it. I love everything about him because I need to tell you this in order for you to kind of understand. I had a
Mm-hmm.
baby when I was 17. As a matter of fact,
Mm-hmm.
today's her 33rd birthday.
Wow.
And so um, the church that I was in asked, well, they were going to ask me to remove my letter because I was pregnant out of wedlock, which means that my membership would be severed. And so I chose to remove my membership from the church. So for a long time, I wasn't a member of a church. And it I felt abandoned,
Mm-hmm.
because I thought this is supposed to be where I can go to be loved on. My parents are so amazing, so that was never a question. But it was the people. But God reminded me people are people.
Mm-hmm.
They have these choices. That's not him. That's not a reflection
Mm-hmm.
of who he is. But I didn't let that stop me from discovering more about him. So I've been that outsider. I've been that castaway but I don't want to be that. He never looked at me that way. And he accepted me for how I was, who I was.
So how do you reconcile that? Going to a place where you are supposed to belong and then turning you away in a time when you really need them. To me, that doesn't feel accepting. It doesn't feel that love. It doesn't feel like that genuine thing we're looking for, that all acceptance, that all unconditional loving. And I think, to me, that's what Jesus is. That's what God is. That's what faith is. It's unconditional love. There's nothing you can do wrong. We are going to love you through it. We are there for you. Everything that happens in our life happens for a reason. It's guiding us. Like, that's the way I look at it. So that's where I struggle with when it comes to religion versus faith. It's like that
Right.
doesn't seem right to me. And you said the word to me, genuine, and it's on your website and you talk about that. Genuine. I think we have to touch on that. And if you are getting turned away, that bothers me. And the fact is like, it seems to be against what we're preaching.
That was a man-made rule.
Yeah.
So that was in that church, in that
Mm-hmm.
congregation, that association, if you will. And that's a man-made rule. That's not scriptural. The church that we go to now, they're so accepting.
Mm-hmm.
Courtney, I go to church with recovering addicts. They've lost their children. They've gotten their children back. They've burned themselves up in meth labs. This is what I go to church with.
Mm-hmm.
We take it all because God does, and He
Yeah.
wants us all there. And so I my thing is I don't want to miss what He has for me.
Mm-hmm.
So if I don't reconcile that, and I know within me that there's something that's stronger than I am, that's more than I am, that I need to be following, then I've got to chase that. And that was getting to know Him. And it never affected me to go back into a church. I never let that stop me, because I knew it was about something more than me.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll tell you something I had to do. I had to own that story too. I
Yeah.
had to admit I got pregnant, I was asked to leave the church. So I had to own those stories of my life. And it took me so long to do that. But He wants me to own it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not something that I need to be used against me. And He
Mm-mm.
doesn't use it against me. So, I just know that I'm made for more, and that He's the one that's made me for more. And that's where I come to that genuine uniqueness of who we are and who He created us to be.
I love that because you said it wasn't about the church. You had to get to know Him and build a relationship with Him. But I question that because to me, God, universe, like I said, whatever we call it, it's within us. We are all a part of that. So when you're saying you need to get to know Him, is that really saying you get to know yourself? You need to get to know yourself because we have Him within us. So is it one and the same?
Yes and no. Yes, in the fact that the Holy Spirit lives within me.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, that is my guiding. That's how I'm guided. Getting to know Him is knowing His word, reading His word, asking Him, "Hey, what do you want me to do today? What do you want me, what do you have laid out for me today?" And He's going to guide me. I don't hear Him audibly, but I hear Him through His word. I see Him through His creations. I hear Him through other people. Um, so that's the way that I communicate with Him. Um, One of the things that He does for me is, if I hear something multiple times, then I better investigate it just a little bit
Mm-hmm.
deeper. So I go, I'll hear something several times, something I wanna really find out, what are you trying to say to me, God, in this. So that's how I communicate with Him,
Mm-hmm.
and I can tell Him anything because He can take it. I've been mad
Mm-hmm.
at Him, and I've shared that with Him too. So it's a two-way communication between us.
So, do you find that you communicate best when you're like in prayer, or is it more of just kind of noticing the subtle hints and the subtle breadcrumbs that He's giving you along your journey?
All of the above. It's in prayer. It's in writing it down. It's in noticing, slowing down enough to notice things. Like, someone said one time, "Notice feathers." I don't like
Mhm.
birds, but I notice there's feathers everywhere. When you look for something, you're going to find it. And
Mhm.
that's the way that I am with Him. When I look for Him, I'm gonna find Him
Mhm.
and see Him in the creation and the different things that are said and different things that are done. Um, in the things that people will come and they will say things to me, and I'm like, "You must have been talking to God about me, because that's exactly what I needed to hear." I mean, these
Yeah.
things happen, but we have to align ourselves with who He says we are in order for, and truly listen to Him, slow down enough to where we hear Him. Take those quiet moments, still our minds, still our hearts, still our souls, so that we can hear Him.
I love everything you're saying because everything you're talking about is so in line with what I talk about, but it's not coming. I don't talk about it from the religious aspect. I talk about it from the spiritual aspect, but it is all the same. And I've come back to this topic time and time again because I think we can all get so wrapped up in the specifics of where we are coming from. And I'm right and you're wrong, or this is how you practice this or that. We don't see each other. And if we break it
Mhm.
down to what we're really truly talking about feathers is just me talking about signs. Hearing, a message once or twice again is me channeling, a higher power. It's all within the same thing. Setting prayers are similar as intentions. All of this stuff goes hand in hand. If we could only just open ourselves up to notice these similarities with one another, we can see that we are all actually having that same experience. It's through our own lens and through our own perception that we're living it. But we are all really truly one, and we are all walking this path together. And I think that's the beauty, is like if we can get past the naming of like, okay, I'm Christian or I'm Muslim or I'm spiritual or I'm atheist is a different thing because they don't believe really in anything. But like if we can if we
Right.
can bring these things together, is we truly are talking about the same thing. All of us are.
So the way that everything that I do here, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
this is the way I practice my life and the way I align
Mm-hmm.
my life. Everything I do here has a purpose,
Yeah.
and that purpose has eternal value.
Mm-hmm.
So everything I do is not necessarily for me now. It's for eternity. It's
Mm-hmm.
for where after I'm gone, where's it going to be done?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's the way that I live my life. It's toward that eternal perspective. And so I look past where I am right now to that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I say that everything I do has a kingdom purpose with eternal value.
So how do you tap into that purpose to go about your day on, like a normal day? What is that? Like, how did you find it? How do you tap into it? And how do you help lead others back to it? Because you are a coach, you help women, you help others
Yeah.
connect to their purpose.
Hmm. Because I lost myself in trying to be something I wasn't. And so when I came back home to who I am, I knew it was going to be a hard journey. I knew that he had never left me. I knew my salvation was there. So I wasn't ever questioning any of that. I just had lost my way. And I came back to that, and he born inside me at that moment this passion for women, for humans, for people to never feel the way I feel or I felt in those moments. I never wanted anyone else to experience what it felt like to be so bright on the outside and so dark
Mhm.
on the inside. And to have everything you can ever imagine in life, but be miserable. I didn't want that for anyone else, and I don't. So that's why I so am passionate about what I do. Is I don't want anyone else to feel that way. But I have to go back to the fact that my identity is all in him.
Mm.
I wouldn't be who I am if it were not for the fact that I'm created in his image. I am a unique masterpiece. So I go back to all of that and I move my life forward from there.
Mm.
And we lose that identity so often of who we are in him. And so that's what I go to. That's my go-to, is to know who you are in him. And I am 100% about people loving themselves.
Mhm.
I am 100% about you loving who you are. Because if you
Mm.
don't love who you are, you can't fully love anybody else. And so I had to learn to love who I was, who he created me to be, and know that I'm enough.
What were the steps to take you there? Because I think loss of identity, especially with women, it's
Mhm.
across the board, but we do lose our way. And I don't think it's rare to find that, everything looks happy and perfect on the outside, but you're unhappy inside. And sometimes we can't even
Right.
put our finger on what that unhappiness or that miserable or that darkness is. Sometimes it's just like you said, you've lost yourself in some way. So it's not like, oh my goodness. I mean, sometimes we can. Sometimes it could be like, this happened in my life, and so I feel this way. But a lot of times, a lot of us are feeling that, and we can't really name why. So how
Right.
do we go there, and how do we start to really find that love of ourselves so that we can shine that light back inside?
I had to listen to the things I said to myself. I had to
Mm,
listen to all the stories that I told myself. I was never going to measure up. I was not good enough. I would never amount to anything in my life. I was never going to be skinny enough. There were so many things that I
mm,
was never going to be. You know, even though that was all stories that I had created in my own mind. It
mhm.
was a snippet of maybe a truth, but I had created this whole entire story that dictated my entire life, and I allowed that to determine everything I did. So I had to go back and listen to the words I said to myself and listen to the words I said to other people about me and really change that thought, really take that thought captive and really change that thought. And I did. I would take those thoughts captive and I'd be like, no, that's not what scripture says about me. That's not what you've told me. So that's not the truth. So I would go back to that. And then I owned my story. I had to admit all my flaws, all my failures, all my successes, and I had to own that. I had to know what my values were, what I stood for, because most people, if you ask them, they have no idea what their values are.
Yep.
No idea. Don't even know how to start. And
Mhm.
so I had to identify my values, what really meant the most to me, and live from there. And then I had to learn to experience life in the fullest in that moment.
Mm.
And that comes down to love. Listen, own, value, experience. And I had to learn to love who I was, but also to allow other people to love me.
Mm.
Because of all the stories and lies that I had told myself, I had kept everyone out from loving me, including God. And I kept everybody at an arm's distance. So I had to open myself up just to really receive that love as well. Not just to give it, but to receive it. And that's what it comes down to. And love is the secret to life.
I love that. I love how I love using that word a lot here. I love how that is, the secret, because I think what comes along with that what you're saying though, is that we need to take some sort of responsibility for how we are
Absolutely.
feeling, for the stories we're telling ourselves, for the walls we're putting up, for, all these different aspects of ourself that we are not allowing ourselves to be vulnerable and open
Mhm.
to the truth. So
Mhm.
being open to the truth means taking responsibility for where we have not been so.
Exactly. And that was what I had to do. I had to completely own my entire life. And what I wanted to escape was me. It wasn't my life. I wanted to escape
Mm.
me. But everywhere I went, there I was. So I
Yeah.
had to figure that out. And it was me. At that moment, I was the problem. So I had to figure all of that out. And I had to be honest with people. And that's not going to be, taken well and received very well from some people. But I had to have hard discussions. It meant really stripping everything away, for lack of
Mhm.
better ways to explain it, and really having hard discussions with people that I love the most.
Yeah, how did you find the courage to do that? Because we don't want to do hard. We live in a society where we don't want to get uncomfortable. We don't want to do hard. We want everything to be easy and happy and pretty and put together with a package. But that's not life.
Mhm. Because I mean, I'll be honest with you, it was the Holy Spirit. That's the only way I could have gotten my strength to do what I did. I would have never been able to have the courage to ever step out and make any of the decisions that I do, including where I am today, sitting here on this podcast. I would have never had the courage to take any of these steps because I was safe where I was.
Hmm.
I was in a safe place. But we're not always called to be safe if we're going to do things for a purpose.
Do you find that you were truly safe though? Because if you're unhappy and miserable and you're looking at, a couple different options like checking out or living your life, I mean, are you really safe?
It was safe because nothing could have changed and I would have still been fine. But in my mind and in my heart, I wouldn't have been fine. But how many people, Courtney, live like that?
Hmm.
They feel that that's where they are, they're safe, And when I use the word safe, I'm meaning like I know what's going on.
Mhm.
I know what to expect. I know what's coming next. And that was true. I knew how life would look. I knew exactly how things were going to go because it was a repeatable past,
Mhm.
because everything was the same. I kept doing the same things, getting the same results, which is insane, but it was the truth. And so I knew that I had to do something different to ever find who I truly was. And I think that's what people are afraid of. They're afraid to
Mhm.
ever remove that mask, to be honest and to be vulnerable, to find who they truly are. And that requires courage, and that requires those hard conversations. Even with yourself. You have to get that conversation with yourself going on.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're so accurate. We do go about our life in that safe zone because
Mhm,
it's predictable. And
mhm,
that's what we don't like. We don't like the unknown. It is safety in the fact of just our own human nature. It's like we want to keep that status quo. We want to fit in. We want to know how
exactly.
it's all going to play out. And when we take those steps to understand who we are, it shakes up our life. And that can be scary. That unknown is
Mhm.
so debilitating for so many of us. So a lot of times it has to take something big to push us out to do something different. But in your case, it sounds like you really just gained that courage in yourself, knowing that something had to change.
I just didn't want to live my life in bondage. I felt like I was completely in prison, but it was my own, I was holding the key
Yeah.
the entire time.
Yeah. We create these worlds and we just live
Mhm.
in them, and then we think we can't change them. Like we can't
Right,
change the outcome. And
right.
that's not the reality. At any every morning we wake up, we have the choice to do something different, to make more of our day, to take responsibility, to step into whatever role we are being called to
Mhm,
play.
mhm, right. And that was where I was, is I wanted to make sure that I stepped into that role. And what I had to do that day was make a choice. And so I will tell people now, you have to make a decision and remember the day that you decided, because all your life you've had a choice,
Mm.
and make that choice. But make the choice that's going to most benefit you, the others around you, but also your purpose. Because I'm a firm believer that everyone has a purpose. Everyone has a purpose. And that purpose is not always going to be the same thing throughout our lives. My purpose has changed in what I was supposed to do in different seasons of life.
So what is that purpose now?
Oh, my purpose is to just share the stories that I have inside me and the experiences that I have, to help people to find that freedom and that inner peace. And it's funny because I tell people, be a cinnamon roll. Where's the best part of a cinnamon roll? The center, right? So be a cinnamon roll. Be so sweet and so soft and so genuine on the inside, and let that flow outward, because
Mhm.
everything around you changes. Even if, let's say this, not all of my situations are just non-existent any longer. There's still chaos around me. There are still circumstances and situations that are not very peaceful, but I'm at peace. And that's the difference.
How did you find that peace? Because I feel like peace usually comes from what I've gathered from the many conversations I've had, from a sense of surrender. That surrender, like we were talking about, into the something bigger, into your purpose, into something, a bigger plan than ourselves. Um, so, how do you find that peace?
The peace that I have does come from God.
Mhm.
I I'll be honest with you, when I started this journey, I didn't want to necessarily make all of everything that I do based on him.
Mhm.
And I'm being very vulnerable with you here. But that's not who I am. And that's not what he's told me I need to do. And so if he's given me this message, and he's given me these experiences in my life that point me back to him, then why not share them? Because if someone
Mhm.
else, it will help someone else, then I want to share it. And he's so faithful in every single thing that he does. Courtney, if you were an outsider and you don't know me very well, but just looking in at my life, you'd be like, how in the world did you end up where you are? I can't tell you other than his hand.
Mm.
That's the only way that I can tell you. I didn't align all of this myself. I
Mhm.
allowed myself to be put into these positions, but he put all this into alignment.
Isn't that interesting? Sometimes it's the things that we want to avoid the most, or we're like, we're not going to make this part of our messaging, or we're not going to build this as our platform. Turns out to be the exact thing that we need to lean into. I find that all the time. Even when I started this business and this podcast and this journey, we started talking about the home because I was afraid to go into what spirituality or what something bigger meant for me and
Mhm.
for the greater good, because I didn't want those outside labels. You care so much what other people think. And the same thing, it sounds like with you. It's like, you don't want to make it all about this, but it's like, it is what you need to make it all about. We have to lean into who we truly are and how we really feel. And it sounds like, when we do that, our path is paved. Our path is wide open. The opportunities, we are put in alignment with the way our life, I don't want to say should or is supposed to, but because, those, nothing can be conscribed, but we're put in an alignment for our best path.
Yes, and my best path points to him. But it did come to the point to where I was like, "Okay, I surrender. I have to do this for you. Like, I can't do this on my own. You've got to be the center of every single thing I do. If I don't come from a place of you, I can't do this.
Mhm.
There's no other way that I can be who I am or what I am because that's how my life flows. I don't want you to think I'm perfect. I don't want you to think that I don't ever do anything that's not, like, kinda questionable because, I mean, I have a podcast that says, "Get your rear in gear with Lori," so,
So what do we have to do to get our rear in gear?
you better figure it out. Start making some movements forward, change gears, it's time to move.
But I think that is key to what you're saying is like we don't have to be perfect. I actually was reading this about you, how we try so hard to be the best wife, the best mom, the best, have the
Mhm,
best house. Like we try, that all comes down to that facade. And I mean, even talking about self-help, wellness, spirituality, there's the word be your best self, which people on the podcast, people that listen to the podcast will know I say all the time, I actually hate that word because I feel like there's no like ultimate self. We are showing up every day as our best self. And when we add that in, when we say you need to be your best self, to me, it's just adding in this other layer of perfectionism that we're striving for that's unattainable. The fact
exactly.
is whether we're walking with God, whether we're walking with the universe, whatever way we are living our life, it's going to be messy. It's going to be imperfect. And that is part of the journey. And we need to open ourselves in that vulnerability to be able to
Absolutely.
embrace that.
Right, and my best self, on some days, my best self is a mess.
Yes,
And so that's when I say the best version of who I am, it's whatever I can bring that day. And some days it's not
exactly.
good. Some days it is a messy house, some days it is no makeup, some days it is not put together, and some days, it's pretty good. But
Yeah.
no, I will never I was a perfectionist. I wanted everything to be so perfect that I didn't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
No, not now. Not now. And I don't even worry about it. I mean,
I
it's
love
just
that.
pretty much just here we go. Let's go and let's see what happens, and let's just do what we know we're supposed to do and move forward.
Well, and even like you said, some days that best self is not, no makeup, messy house, walking around,
Yeah.
we're eating cereal for dinner. Sometimes that is actually the best day. We have to allow
Mhm.
ourselves to be okay with that and let go of this perfectionism because, you know, it is real, and it's obviously a big thing for women. We all strive for this perfectionism, and I think it's part of society's images, it's conditioning, all this stuff. But like, what is perfect? And we need to readjust what that is, and we need to be able to go about our life with that sliding scale. Like, it can change day by day, it can change minute by minute. Like,
Yeah.
one thing can happen in our day, and all of a sudden, like, our best self can be a completely different version than how we woke up.
That's exactly right. And that's the thing that I love about it. All God has to work with is imperfect people. He
Hmm.
doesn't have perfect people to work with. All he has is imperfect people. And that has been since the beginning of time. So what makes us think that we can be so perfect? You know,
Totally.
we can't. I mean, and my I say too, I am perfectly imperfect, created by a perfect God.
Hmm.
I am perfect just the way that I am because I am imperfect, but I'm moving forward to that perfection. But that's not going to be here. I can't ever be perfect here. I'll do my best. I'll do what I'm supposed to do.
Hmm. Well, I think that's the key is if we can remember, none of us were created to be perfect. We are
Exactly.
created perfectly as we should be, as we need to be, as who we are. But
Mhm.
that perfection does not exist on this plane.
It does not. It does not.
So we can continue to strive to be better, but we have to understand that this is bringing us full circle into this conversation, that there is something bigger out there for us, leading us and guiding the way, just like this conversation. Like I said when we started, I never know where we're going to go in a conversation because I feel that spirit is going to speak through me. Whatever message needs to come
Right.
out is going to come out, and we are going to have the conversation that we need to have. And we need to go about our life that way. We can't script it. And as a person who writes scripts literally, I have to take that step back myself, that I can't script my life. We can't script how things go. And when we lean in and give that surrender over, that's where the magic happens and that's where the miracles happen. But
Exactly.
that's a hard way to live. I mean, it's a lot easier to script everything out and just live in that safety that we were talking about.
Right. Right. And that's not even possible. To
Hmm.
me, even though I wanted it to be that way, life in that safety zone, there's still changes that come about. There's still things I can't control that I try to control that it's not possible to live there. It's not sustainable. I wanted a
Hmm.
sustainable life. And that had to be putting away all mask because if you try to put on every mask, like I said, it's not sustainable because I have to wear this mask to go over here and this mask to go over there. It gets so confusing. And I'm like, okay, I can't keep up now. And then you just quit.
Yeah. It's like a liar trying to keep up with their web of lies. I mean, how you can't. At some point, you're going
Exactly.
to trip up. So, talking about writing
Yes.
stories, which you've done, tell me about your book. So, I know that's a place where you get very vulnerable. Writing a book is a very vulnerable act, no matter what kind of story it is. So, let's see.
It
Let's talk about it.
is. So the book is a snippet. This is
Hmm.
stories that we create in our lives. So it's a snippet of a true story.
Hmm.
It is actually how my daughter met her husband, and it was an accident that she saved a girl's life, and he was the fireman that landed the helicopter so that they could life flight her out. And so I took that snippet and I created
Hmm.
this entire story based on that. And it's a story of someone who did have a safe life. And in the book, she says, I lived safe until I wanted to feel the teeth of the wrought iron fence. So she wanted to know what it was like on the other side. And she tries it out. And so many of us, that's real life. We have certain things certain ways, but then there's something that's tempting us, that pull and that enticing from the world, and that's where she went. And it took her on a really pretty bad path. And she comes back around, and that's where she meets the love of her life. But that's not an easy road either.
Yeah.
So it goes from doubt and despair and betrayal and abandonment into hope, love, redemption, forgiveness, and grace. And so it's a transformative story. But through those pages, there's a lot of stuff about me. It's a lot
Hmm.
of personal stuff about my life and how my life played out and different aspects of my life. Um, and so that's kind of where I took the story as well. I took different parts of me and different parts of that story, and I created this fiction story.
Well, I think that is the best kind of story. And as a writer, and I ghostwrite for others, I walk people through that because so often, if you're creating a story, you don't want to go there. You don't want to show the truth and the
Mhm.
vulnerability of your life, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. You
Right.
know, to me, the best way to connect is by being vulnerable and sharing your stories. We do not connect through preaching. We do not connect through, this is what you do, do as I say. We connect through seeing ourselves in each other. And so being open, and even in a fiction, there's always going to be parts of that writer. And I think people need to realize that every book they read, I've actually had this conversation with one of the people that I'm helping her write her book. And she's like, she doesn't necessarily want to go there, and she wants it to be teaching, and she wanted it to have these lessons. And I talked to her and like, it doesn't have to be actually completely factual. It doesn't have to be 1,000% do this to be teaching you or have a lesson. Like, we can learn through the truth that someone is sharing in their story, whether it's, 50% true and 50% made up, all those different things. But that vulnerability is what is going to allow others to connect to your story, is going to allow others to take that message. Any sort of book, I don't care if it's fiction or nonfiction, is going to teach you something, is going to give you a
Right.
message. And the best way to do that is through the experience.
Every movie that we ever see, there's always an
Mhm.
underlying theme. It's just we don't
Yep.
pay attention to that. We are not to me, we're not in tune with life and reality really enough to see that theme that is woven throughout those stories.
Hmm.
Take, for instance, Shawshank Redemption. I don't know if you've ever seen that story, but
Yep. It's a
it's
wonderful.
hope and resilience.
Mhm.
I mean, it's the perseverance of a soul that is seeking and chasing their dreams, but he never gives up.
Mhm.
I mean, it's just those things are not people don't pay attention to those kind of things. And so the theme throughout Burning Hope is it is love, but it is also losing yourself and then finding yourself again. But it's not an easy journey. And so Gabby goes on that journey.
But isn't that interesting, even talking about Shawshank Redemption? So you can take that story and look at it in so many different ways. I've actually just recently done that myself, not with Shawshank Redemption, but a couple different movies that I loved, throughout the years. And every time I watch them, I'm taken on a different journey. How we
Mhm.
perceive anything in any given moment will change depending on what we're going through. And that's what we need to realize about life is all through the perception and lens that we are creating and walking in that moment. And we
Exactly.
can see it in so many different ways. So you might read your story. Let's say I pick up your book tomorrow and read the whole thing. I might get one message tomorrow. A week from now, a year from now will be something totally different. So we need to open ourselves up to the messages, just like this conversation, that are coming through that we need. Even like you said, how
Mhm.
people will come into your life to share a message with you, something that you need. The
Exactly.
more we hear it, the more we see it, it will come to us when we need to hear it.
Absolutely. It will. That's very it's spot on. It is so true. So true.
I love it. So where can we get your book? I know it's coming out soon. Where can we order it? Where can we pre-order it? And how do we get in touch with you?
So the book is going to be available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and Target, and that's going to be in hopefully Cyber Monday. We're hoping so that it's a pre-order there. There's a list now that you can go to get on the order list at my website, which is LoriMcAfeeCoaching.com. And all social media platforms I'm on. So
Perfect. Well, Lori, thank you so much for joining me today and being vulnerable and having such an open conversation, because these are topics that I think we really do need to
yeah,
explore more, and it's okay to talk about. I think sometimes we shy away from topics of faith or purpose or God and religion. And when you're growing up, you're told, don't talk about politics, religion, and money. I actually think we should talk about those things a little bit more. So I really appreciate your vulnerability and honesty and opening up to me today.
thank you so much. I appreciate you having me. It's been wonderful. I've loved our conversation.
And that's it for today's Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you, Lori McAfee, for joining me in such a beautiful discussion about faith, bringing God into our lives and finding our purpose. If you want to pre-order Lori's book, I'll put all the information in the show notes below. And as always, you can find Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers and Intentional Media on our website at CourtneyMyers.com. That's where you'll find our books, our courses, and everything else we have going on. Can't wait to talk to you soon. Bye.